You don't collapse in some dramatic way. You don't burn out loudly. You just wake up one day and realize you're tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. Your schedule is packed, your head is crowded, and even when nothing urgent is happening, your body feels like it's bracing for impact. You followed the rules, you were reliable, you worked hard, you stayed professional, and somehow, life still feels stuck on repeat. The strange part isn't the work, it's the lack of movement. Another year passes and your position barely shifts. The money doesn't stretch further, the stress doesn't ease. What quietly eats at you is watching others move differently. People who don't seem to grind as hard, don't rush as much, yet have more say, more space, more control. They aren't better than you, but the world treats them like they matter more. Take someone like Alex. 10 years in the same field, always described as solid, dependable, the backbone of the team. He's the one managers trust. He's also the one they never choose. New roles open up, new titles appear, and Alex is always told he's invaluable right where he is. He trains people who end up managing him. He waits, because waiting feels responsible. But waiting only works if the system plans to reward you. Effort feels noble, but nobility doesn't pay rent. If this hits close to home, it's because you've been living it quietly. You're not failing. You're functioning inside a pattern that feeds on your endurance. And if this feels like it's describing your life a little too accurately, like the video, because the next part only matters if you stop pretending this exhaustion is normal. When things don't work out, your instinct isn't anger, it's self-correction. You assume you need to be better, sharper, more disciplined, more patient. You replay conversations in your head, upgrade your routines, read another book, listen to another podcast, because you were taught that progress is a personal responsibility. If you're not winning, it must be because you're not trying hard enough. That idea sounds empowering on the surface, but it hides a trap. It keeps all the pressure inside you, while the structure around you stays untouched. Society feeds you a clean story. Work hard, be loyal, don't complain. Put your head down and results will follow. This story feels fair, which is why it survives. But fairness is not how systems operate. Systems respond to incentives, not intentions. When you consistently give more than required, the lesson learned is not that you deserve more. The lesson learned is that you can be used more. Picture someone like Chris, always the first to say yes. Yes to staying late. Yes to fixing mistakes that weren't his. Yes to covering shifts, smoothing tensions, picking up slack. At first, it feels like momentum. He's visible. He's trusted. He's praised. Then something subtle happens. The praise replaces progress. The workload grows, but the authority doesn't. The expectations rise, but the rewards stay flat. Chris becomes essential without becoming powerful. And once that happens, moving him becomes inconvenient. The system doesn't see a candidate for advancement. It sees a stabilizer, someone who makes inefficiency tolerable, someone who absorbs friction quietly. This is why effort alone is dangerous. Effort broadcasts capacity. It tells the environment how much pressure you can take before you break. And once that threshold is known, it becomes the baseline. Loyalty doesn't scare a system. It comforts it. It says you won't leave. It says you'll endure. It says you'll internalize the cost instead of pushing it outward. The system doesn't reward loyalty. It monetizes it. It converts your patience into continuity, your silence into permission, your pride into a leash. And here's the part that stings. When people like Chris look around and see others advancing with less effort, they don't question the rules. They question themselves. They think they lack confidence or charisma or luck. They don't realize those people learned something different. They learned when to stop giving, when to pause, when to create friction instead of absorbing it. The guilt you feel at the idea of pulling back isn't moral, it's conditioned. You were trained to associate restraint with selfishness and endurance with worth. So when effort doesn't pay off, you double down instead of stepping back. You don't see exploitation because it doesn't feel hostile. It feels familiar. It feels like responsibility. This is the moment where the belief starts to crack. Not loudly, quietly. You begin to notice that your exhaustion isn't random. It's patterned. It benefits someone. And once that thought enters your mind, you can't unsee it. The blame shifts, not outward in rage, but inward in clarity. You stop asking what's wrong with you and start asking what this environment actually rewards. That question changes how you listen, how you observe, how you interpret silence and praise. It's the first sign that the old story is losing its grip and that something more accurate and more dangerous is about to take its place. Power starts to look different the moment you stop viewing life through effort and start viewing it through position. And this is exactly where a Machiavellian lens becomes useful. Niccolò Machiavelli was never interested in telling people how to be good. He was obsessed with understanding why some people ruled while others worked themselves into the ground for nothing. What he noticed was simple and uncomfortable. Power did not flow toward the most dedicated or the most exhausted. It flowed toward the ones who could step back, conserve energy, and see the structure everyone else was trapped inside. When a person is constantly tired, they don't analyze. They adapt. They don't question. They comply. A tired man doesn't rebel. He complies. Exhaustion narrows vision. It locks attention onto the next task, the next deadline, the next problem that needs fixing, until the bigger picture disappears completely. Think about a workplace you've seen up close. There's always someone running around putting out fires, answering messages instantly, solving issues that technically aren't theirs. They feel indispensable. At the same time, there's someone else who seems strangely calm. Fewer tasks, fewer visible hours. But when a real decision is made, budget, promotion, direction, that second person's voice carries weight. The first person is too busy cleaning up consequences to influence causes. This isn't because one works harder or cares more. It's because one is positioned to decide while the other is positioned to react. Machiavelli understood that rulers protected their strength by avoiding unnecessary labor. They delegated strain downward and kept their own energy reserved for judgment and timing. Not because they were lazy, but because power requires clarity, and clarity cannot exist in constant fatigue. When you are always in motion, you are blind to shifts in loyalty, blind to opportunity, blind to leverage. You mistake movement for progress because stopping feels risky, even immoral. But stopping is often the only way to see the board instead of just your square on it. This lens doesn't flatter you. It doesn't comfort you. It forces a difficult realization. Your exhaustion may not be evidence of virtue. It may be evidence that you are standing in the wrong place. Once this idea settles in, you start noticing patterns you ignored before. Who is always rushing? Who is never hurried? Who fixes problems? Who defines them? Who speaks first? Who speaks last? Those patterns reveal more about power than motivation ever will. And if you're honest about what this perspective stirs up inside you right now, comment one word. Tired, stuck, angry. Naming it is the first step towards seeing it clearly. The people this hurts the most are never the slackers. It's the ones who can be counted on. The ones who step in when things wobble. The ones who don't panic, don't complain, and don't drop the ball. Early on, that ability feels like an advantage. You become the steady one, the fixer. The person others relax around because you'll handle it. What you don't see yet is that every time you rescue a situation, you're teaching the environment something about you. You're teaching it where pressure can be sent safely. Competence doesn't scare systems, it stabilizes them. And stable systems don't like change. That's why competence is not the same as freedom. Freedom comes from leverage. Competence often creates obligation. Picture someone like Ryan. Whenever his manager misses a detail, Ryan catches it. When a plan falls apart, Ryan rebuilds it quietly. He's praised in meetings. He's trusted with sensitive work. And he's always told how important he is. Years go by. New roles appear. Ryan's name never comes up. Not because he isn't good enough, but because he's too useful where he is. Moving him would create a mess someone else would have to clean, so he stays. This is the part most people don't want to accept. Being good at dirty work makes you permanent in dirty work. If you're great at fixing other people's mistakes, you become the designated mistake absorber. If you're great at smoothing tension, you become the emotional shock absorber. The system doesn't see your potential. It sees your function. And once a function proves reliable, it gets locked in. This is why praise often replaces progress. Compliments arrive instead of raises. Appreciation replaces authority. You're told you're invaluable, and that word feels good until you realize invaluable often means immovable. Machiavellian thinking cuts through the comfort here. Power avoids dependence on any single operator. It doesn't elevate the person who keeps the machine running. It elevates the person who decides where the machine goes. The closer you are to daily survival tasks, the further you are from strategic movement. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Your pride helps maintain the trap. You tell yourself you're the strong one, the responsible one, the one who doesn't let things fall apart. That identity feels honorable. It also makes it hard to step back without guilt, because stepping back feels like abandonment. But what you call loyalty is often unpaid leadership with no authority attached. You carry outcomes without shaping direction. That imbalance drains you slowly. The shock comes when you realize that the more indispensable you become, the less freedom you actually have. If removing you breaks the system will never let you leave. Not out of malice, but out of necessity. And every time you take on extra work to prove your value, you're reinforcing that necessity. You're tightening the loop. This is why the advice to simply work harder fails capable people. It feeds the exact mechanism holding them in place. The people who eventually escape don't do it by becoming careless or incompetent. They do it by becoming selective. They stop fixing everything. They let small failures surface. They redirect their effort away from maintenance and toward leverage. That shift feels risky because you were trained to equate restraint with laziness. But restraint is not withdrawal. It's placement. It's choosing where your energy creates movement instead of stability. Systems reward stability with containment. They reward leverage with mobility. Once you see this, the old question loses relevance. The question was never, how do I prove myself? The question becomes, what am I doing that keeps proving I belong right here? And once that question lands, it opens the door to a different approach entirely, because the answer isn't more effort. It's a change in where and how you apply it. Once you see that effort has been holding you in place, The instinct isn't relief, it's confusion. If pushing harder isn't the way out, then what are you supposed to do instead? Most people were never taught how to answer that question, because everything they learned rewarded movement, not judgment. So the first shift isn't external, it's internal. You stop measuring yourself by how much you carry and start measuring yourself by what actually moves. Effort fills time. Leverage changes outcomes. Effort asks how busy you can stay. Leverage asks which single action alters the result. This difference sounds abstract until you see it play out in real life. Think about how decisions really happen. Not in long email chains, not in endless meetings. They happen in short conversations between the right people. One call at the right moment can outweigh weeks of visible labor. That's not unfair. That's how systems work. Picture someone like Ben. For years, he tried to stand out by doing more than everyone else. Faster replies, longer hours, perfect execution. He was always exhausted and always overlooked. The shift came when he stopped trying to impress with output and started paying attention to where influence lived. Instead of fixing everything, he asked fewer questions, but better ones. Instead of answering immediately, he waited. That pause gave him information. It showed him who needed what, who decided what, and where effort actually converted into leverage. Nothing about his skill set changed. His placement did. This is the part most people misunderstand. Moving from effort to leverage doesn't mean becoming passive or careless. It means becoming intentional. You reduce volume so you can increase impact. You stop flooding the room with noise and start choosing moments. Noise feels productive, but it hides patterns. Silence feels uncomfortable, but it reveals them. When you step back just enough, you start noticing which problems matter and which ones are designed to keep you busy. You see who benefits from your constant availability. You notice how often urgency is manufactured. This awareness changes behavior naturally. You stop volunteering for tasks that don't shift your position. You invest your energy where decisions are made, not where damage control happens. This is why people who always look busy often feel powerless, while people who appear calm tend to hold influence. Direction beats speed when the destination matters. Busy is noise. Direction is power. The guilt that shows up when you slow down isn't moral. It's conditioning. You were trained to associate worth with effort, so restraint feels like failure. In reality, restraint is placement. It's choosing where your energy compounds instead of evaporates. This shift doesn't come with applause. In fact, it can make you look less impressive in the short term. You may seem quieter, less reactive, less involved. But what you're gaining isn't visibility, it's leverage. And leverage changes how people respond to you without you needing to push. It changes who waits, who listens, who includes you in decisions instead of just execution. This is the path most people never take, not because it's hidden, but because it requires patience. There's a gap where you're no longer busy, but not yet powerful. And that gap feels dangerous. But if you can tolerate it, you stop being pulled by urgency and start shaping direction. And before moving on, don't just nod along. Pause and comment one word that describes where you are right now. Busy, stuck, aware, or ready. Writing it forces you to stop reacting and actually notice your position on the board. The discomfort you feel when you slow down isn't a warning sign. It's withdrawal. Your body has been conditioned to constant reaction. So the absence of urgency feels like danger. When you stop replying immediately, when you leave on time, when you don't jump in to fix what isn't yours, guilt shows up fast and loud. You start explaining yourself in your head. You imagine consequences that haven't happened. That reaction isn't intuition. It's training. You were taught that being valuable means being available, that being committed means being reachable, that being serious means being exhausted. Over time, that belief hardens into identity. You don't just work hard, you prove yourself through depletion. But here's the inversion most people never make. Rest is not the opposite of effort. It's the opposite of reaction. And reaction is what keeps you powerless. Every time you respond instantly, you give away timing. Every time you fill silence, you remove pressure. Every time you rush to stabilize a situation, you signal that you are the buffer. Power doesn't come from filling gaps. It comes from leaving them. Gaps force recalibration. They make other people adjust instead of you. Think about someone like Andrew. He does solid work, but he doesn't linger. He leaves at the same time every day without explanation. He doesn't rush to reply after hours. He doesn't volunteer commentary unless it matters. At first, people assume he's disengaged. Then something shifts. When Andrew speaks, conversations pause. When he's not immediately available, decisions wait. His presence starts to carry weight because it's not constant. What changed wasn't his output. It was his availability. Availability is inflation. When something is everywhere, it becomes cheap. When it's controlled, it becomes valuable. Rest creates that control. Not the kind of rest that numbs you, but the kind that interrupts automatic response. The pause before answering. The decision to let someone else handle discomfort. The refusal to absorb chaos just because you can. That pause creates space, and space creates power. Space lets you observe instead of react. It lets patterns surface. You start noticing which emergencies repeat because no one owns them. You see which people rely on your immediacy to avoid responsibility. You recognize how often urgency is manufactured, not because it's real, but because it works. None of that is visible when you're constantly engaged. Exhaustion narrows vision. Space widens it. This is why rest feels threatening to systems built on extraction. A rested person is alert. An alert person notices leverage. And a person who notices leverage becomes unpredictable. That's why guilt shows up so aggressively when you slow down. It's meant to pull you back into motion before clarity forms. But guilt fades when you don't obey it. The first few times you hold back, it feels wrong. Then it feels neutral. Eventually, it feels natural. You stop apologizing for not reacting. You stop explaining why you're unavailable. You let silence do the communicating. And silence is loud in environments addicted to noise. People begin to feel your boundaries instead of hearing about them. They stop assuming your time is theirs. They start checking instead of dumping. This isn't rebellion. It's containment. Like a dam holding back water, energy only creates force when it's not released everywhere. When you leak it constantly, nothing builds. When you hold it, pressure accumulates. That pressure doesn't make you aggressive. It makes you deliberate. You choose where to engage. You decide when effort is worth it. Rest becomes a filter, not an escape. It protects your attention so it can be deployed with intent. And slowly, something unexpected happens. You're less drained, but more effective. Less busy, but more influential. The guilt that once followed rest gets replaced by something else. Control. Because once you experience what it's like to stop reacting and start choosing, you realize exhaustion was never proof of dedication. It was the price of being endlessly accessible in a system that rewards whoever leaks the least. The mistake most people make when they finally see the trap is assuming escape has to be loud. They imagine a dramatic resignation, a confrontation, a clean break that proves self-respect. That fantasy feels empowering, but it usually hands all remaining leverage back to the system. Real exits don't announce themselves. They unfold quietly while everything looks normal on the surface. This is where the double life strategy begins. You don't quit your job. You don't signal dissatisfaction. You don't let frustration leak into your tone or behavior. You stay exactly where you are, because your current position is camouflage. Income is stability. Stability buys time. And time is the only currency that allows you to build leverage without desperation. The shift happens internally first. You stop performing for approval and start performing for cover. You do what is necessary to remain credible, but you no longer donate excess energy for free. You meet expectations instead of exceeding them in ways that only benefit others. This doesn't collapse anything. It exposes how little of your overwork was actually required. Think about someone like Noah. For years, he equated effort with security. He stayed late, replied instantly, volunteered constantly. When he finally pulled back to a sustainable level, nothing broke. Deadlines still moved. Meetings still happened. The machine didn't need his exhaustion. It needed his presence. That realization changed everything. With reclaimed energy, Noah stopped rushing and started watching. He paid attention to patterns most people miss because they're too busy reacting. Who actually decides? Not who talks the most. Where money pauses before moving. Which conversations happen privately before becoming public decisions. Who gets informed early and who gets informed last. That observation phase is critical. Your job becomes a classroom, not a battlefield. You are being paid to learn how power functions from the inside. Most people waste this access by only working. While others complain or compete, you study incentives. You notice how authority is exercised quietly, how credit is assigned selectively, how blame travels downward. This knowledge becomes part of your exit. You don't build your escape by talking about it. You build it by stacking small advantages in silence. Maybe it's a skill that compounds instead of drains. Maybe it's a relationship with someone who operates at a higher level. Maybe it's a project that grows slowly without attention. The form doesn't matter. The silence does. The moment you announce dissatisfaction or ambition, the environment adjusts. Access narrows. Opportunities disappear. Silence keeps you underestimated. And being underestimated is one of the safest positions you can occupy while preparing to leave. This is not about deception for ego. It's about timing. You're not sabotaging your role. You're using it as a platform. You continue to perform, but emotionally, you detach. Praise stops defining you. Criticism stops shaking you. You become less reactive, more observant. A double agent in plain sight. Externally compliant. Internally strategic. This creates calm, because your future is no longer dependent on recognition from people who benefit from keeping you where you are. The real challenge isn't discipline. It's patience. You'll want confirmation that this plan is working. You'll want to tell someone. You'll want reassurance. That impulse is what exposes most people too early. They trade momentum for validation. The long game requires tolerating invisibility. No applause, no external proof. Just quiet progress while everything looks unchanged. Most people can't handle that discomfort. They need to be seen trying. That's why they stay trapped. The smartest exit is invisible. When the moment finally arrives, it doesn't feel dramatic. It feels inevitable. You don't ask permission. You don't negotiate from weakness. You don't explain your reasons. You simply step out of a role that once consumed you and into a position you built while no one was watching. That's not rebellion. That's patience sharpened into strategy. Everything you've heard up to this point leads to one uncomfortable truth. Hard work was never supposed to define you. It was supposed to serve you. Somewhere along the way, that relationship flipped. Effort stopped being a tool and became an identity. You learn to introduce yourself through what you endure. Long hours, heavy loads, constant pressure. You learn to feel proud of how much you can take. That pride kept you moving, but it also kept you small. While you were proving dedication through exhaustion, someone else was quietly shaping outcomes. Not by lifting more, but by deciding where lifting even mattered. This is the difference between the one carrying bricks and the one drawing the blueprint. The brick carrier measures the day by sweat. The architect measures it by structure. One asks, how hard can I push? The other asks, where does this lead? When the building is finished, the labor disappears. The design remains. That's not cruelty. That's reality. Labor is replaceable. Direction is not. The future doesn't belong to the people willing to grind the longest. It belongs to the people who can pause, observe, and position themselves where decisions are made. Machines will always outperform raw effort. Systems will always exploit unlimited availability. But judgment, timing, and restraint remain scarce. That's where leverage lives. This is why the shift you're making isn't about rejecting work. It's about refusing to worship it. You still act. You still apply effort. But now effort is placed, not leaked. You choose when to engage and when to hold back. You stop reacting to every demand and start responding only where it counts. Space becomes part of your strategy. Silence becomes a signal. Your energy stops being consumed by maintenance and starts contributing to movement. This isn't a loud transformation. It's subtle. People don't notice it immediately. They just start adjusting. They wait instead of assuming. They listen instead of dumping. Your time gains weight because it's no longer unlimited. Your presence gains gravity because it's no longer constant. That's when you realize you're no longer functioning as a beast of burden. You're operating as an architect, designing position instead of proving worth. Most people will hear this and walk away unchanged. Grinding feels familiar. Endurance feels honest. Stepping back feels risky. That's why they stay busy and stuck. That's why this path works. It filters. It demands patience, restraint, and the ability to live without applause while something stronger is built underneath. Stop proving your worth. Start designing your position. If this way of seeing the world shifted something in you, subscribe. Because this channel is for people who want sovereignty, not motivation. And if you want access to what can't be said publicly, the deeper strategies and the uncensored psychology, join the channel. Most people won't do this. That's exactly why it works.